March 23, 2019, northern Nigeria, 0200 hours. Deep in the Sambisa forest, 200 innocent people wait to die. Women, children, aid workers, teachers. They've been held captive by Boko Haram for 47 days. 47 days of terror, starvation, and brutal treatment by one of Africa's most violent terrorist organizations. Intelligence reports say they will be executed at dawn. In 4 hours, unless something changes, 200 people will be murdered on camera as a propaganda victory for terrorism. But something is about to change. 6 kilometers away, 30 operators from multiple special forces units are moving through the darkness. British SAS, American Delta Force, French Commandos, Nigerian Special Forces. An international coalition formed for one purpose: get those hostages out before sunrise. The compound where the hostages are held is a fortress. 30-foot walls, guard towers, machine gun positions, and 150 heavily armed Boko Haram fighters who have orders to kill all hostages if rescue is attempted. The math is brutal. 30 operators, 150 terrorists, 200 hostages who will be caught in the crossfire, a 4-hour window before execution begins, and a compound designed to be impossible to breach. This is Operation Black Horizon, the most complex hostage rescue mission in African history. A mission so sensitive it would remain classified for 3 years. And a race against time that would require perfect execution, extraordinary courage, and a willingness to risk everything. The mission began 2 days ago, when satellite imagery confirmed the hostage location. For 47 days, intelligence agencies had been searching, following leads, tracking communications, analyzing patterns. The hostages had been moved 6 times, always staying ahead of rescue attempts. But this time, Boko Haram made a mistake. They used a satellite phone to send propaganda demands. The call was traced. Reconnaissance drones were dispatched, and there they were, 200 hostages in a compound deep in the Sambisa forest. The decision was immediate: launch a rescue operation. But the challenges were enormous. The compound was in dense jungle, accessible only by foot. No roads, no landing zones for helicopters within 3 kilometers. The terrain heavily favored the defenders. Boko Haram had learned from previous rescue attempts. They had fortified the compound with overlapping fields of fire. They had positioned snipers in the surrounding jungle, and they had standing orders to execute all hostages at the first sign of attack. The rescue force needed to get in fast, neutralize 150 terrorists before they could harm the hostages, and get everyone out through hostile jungle to the extraction point. And they had to do it all in darkness, in one of the most dangerous regions in Africa. The International Task Force assembled at a forward operating base 50 kilometers from the target. British SAS would lead the assault. They had the most experience with complex hostage rescues. American Delta Force would provide heavy weapons support and secure the perimeter. French commandos would handle breaching operations. Nigerian Special Forces would serve as guides. They knew the terrain and the enemy. The commander was a British SAS officer with 15 years of experience. He'd planned and executed 23 combat operations, but this was the most complex he'd ever faced. "Gentlemen," he addressed the assembled operators, "we have one chance at this. If we fail, 200 people die. If we're detected early, 200 people die. If we're too slow, 200 people die. The margin for error is 0. But I've worked with every one of you. I know what you're capable of, and I know we can do this." The plan was intricate. 3 teams would move simultaneously. Team Alpha, 12 SAS operators, would breach the main compound from the north, directly to the building where most hostages were held. Team Bravo, 8 Delta Force operators, would attack from the south, drawing enemy fire and preventing reinforcements from reaching the hostage building. Team Charlie, 10 French and Nigerian operators, would secure the eastern approach and set up the evacuation route. They would move in complete silence until the breach. Then maximum violence of action. Overwhelm the enemy so quickly they never have a chance to harm the hostages. It had to be perfect. At 02:15 hours, the force moved out. They traveled on foot through the jungle, using night vision to navigate. Every man carried suppressed weapons. Every man knew his exact role. There was no radio chatter, only hand signals in the darkness. The jungle was alive with sounds, insects, animals, the distant rumble of thunder. The operators moved like ghosts, covering 6 kilometers in 90 minutes through some of the most difficult terrain in Africa. At 03:45 hours, they reached their final assault positions. Team Alpha was 200 meters from the north wall. Team Bravo was in position to the south. Team Charlie had secured the evacuation route. The commander checked his watch. 03:50 hours, 10 minutes until breach. He scanned the compound through thermal imaging. Heat signatures showed sentries walking the walls, guards in towers, clusters of heat in the buildings, probably hostages packed together, and in the largest building, the signature of 150 fighters. The terrorists had concentrated their forces in one location, probably to better control the hostages. It was both good and bad news. Good, because the terrorists were together, easier to target. Bad, because any firefight would happen with the hostages right there. 03:55 hours, 5 minutes. The breach teams checked their equipment one final time. Flashbangs, breaching charges, bolt cutters for chains and locks, medical supplies, zip ties for prisoners. Everything they would need for the next 15 minutes of chaos. 03:58 hours, 2 minutes. The commander whispered into his radio. All teams, this is actual. Stand by for breach. Weapons tight until my command. Then we go loud and fast. Good hunting. 03:59 hours, 1 minute. Every operator took a breath, made peace with whatever came next. These were men who had trained for years for this exact moment. But training and reality are different things. And reality was about to get very violent. 0400 hours, execute. Would you volunteer for a mission with 5% survival rate? Comment, yes or no. The breaching charges detonated simultaneously on 3 walls. The explosions were massive, blowing man-sized holes through the concrete. Flashbangs followed immediately, blinding, deafening, disorienting anyone inside. Team Alpha poured through the north breach. They moved with practiced efficiency, weapons up, clearing corners and doorways. The building interior was dark, smoky, chaotic. Terrorists scrambled for weapons. Hostages screamed. Confusion reigned. British military, stay down, stay down, the operators shouted as they advanced. They needed the hostages to get low, out of the line of fire. The first terrorist appeared in a doorway, AK-47 raised. 2 suppressed shots from an SAS operator, and he dropped. Then another terrorist. And another. The operators were engaging targets faster than the enemy could react. Team Bravo hit the south side hard and loud. They weren't trying to be quiet. They wanted to draw attention, to make Boko Haram think the main assault was coming from their direction. Heavy machine gun fire raked the southern buildings. Grenades exploded. It was a storm of violence designed to fix the enemy in place. It worked. Boko Haram fighters rushed to the southern wall, thinking that was where they needed to defend. This pulled them away from the hostages, giving Team Alpha precious seconds to work. Inside the main building, Team Alpha found the first group of hostages, 30 women and children chained together in a room. An SAS operator with bolt cutters started freeing them, while others provided security. "We're British military," a female operator told them calmly. "We're here to take you home. But you need to move quickly and quietly. Can you do that?" The women nodded, tears streaming down their faces. They couldn't believe rescue had come, but the easy part was over. Now they had to get 200 hostages out of a compound while fighting 150 terrorists in close quarters. The building had 3 levels. Ground floor, 50 hostages secured. Second floor, intelligence said another 80 hostages. Third floor, 70 more. Team Alpha had to clear each level while under fire from Boko Haram fighters, who were starting to realize what was happening. At the stairwell to the second floor, 3 terrorists had barricaded themselves. They opened fire as Team Alpha approached, killing 1 Nigerian operator and wounding a British sergeant. The return fire was instant and overwhelming. All 3 terrorists died in seconds, but the noise had alerted the entire compound. Boko Haram knew this was a rescue operation, and they knew their orders: kill the hostages before they could be rescued. A terrorist commander on the 3rd floor grabbed his radio and screamed, "Execute them! Execute them all!" 4 terrorists on the 2nd floor heard the order and turned their weapons toward a group of hostages. What happened next would be replayed in after-action reports for years. An SAS operator, moving faster than should be humanly possible, covered 15 meters in seconds, throwing himself between the terrorists and the hostages. He killed 3 terrorists with precision shots. The 4th terrorist's weapon jammed. Before he could clear it, another operator put 2 rounds in his chest. The hostages were saved, but barely. All teams, this is Alpha. We have hostiles attempting to execute hostages. Accelerate timeline. We need to clear this building now. Team Alpha split into 2 groups. One group continued up to secure the 3rd floor. The other started moving freed hostages down and out of the building toward the evacuation route. The second group of hostages on the 2nd floor was in worse condition. They had been beaten, starved. Some could barely walk. The operators had to carry them, which slowed the evacuation to a crawl. Meanwhile, Team Bravo was in a full-scale firefight on the southern perimeter. Boko Haram had committed over 100 fighters to stop what they thought was the main assault. The Delta Force operators were outnumbered 12 to 1, but they had superior training, equipment, and coordination. They used the compound's own defenses against it, taking positions behind walls, using buildings for cover, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the southern approach into a kill zone. Every time Boko Haram tried to mass for an assault, American precision fire cut them down. But Delta was running low on ammunition. They'd been in sustained combat for 15 minutes, burning through magazines at an unsustainable rate. Alpha, this is Bravo. We are getting pressed hard here. Estimate 90 hostiles still active on our side. Ammo at 40%. How much longer? Bravo, Alpha. Still have 70 hostages on 3rd floor. Need 5 more minutes. Copy, we'll hold, but make it fast. On the 3rd floor, Team Alpha found the final group of hostages in the worst conditions yet. They were chained to radiators, barely conscious, severely dehydrated. Some had been beaten so badly they couldn't stand, and guarding them were 20 Boko Haram fighters who had decided to make a last stand. The SAS commander assessed the situation. The room was 30 meters long, 20 terrorists at one end, 70 hostages in the middle, his team at the other end. If they breached the room, there would be a massive firefight with the hostages in the middle. He needed a different approach. This is Alpha Actual to Bravo. I need you to create the biggest diversion you can, everything you've got. We need these terrorists' attention elsewhere for 30 seconds. Copy, stand by. 15 seconds later, Team Bravo unleashed hell on the southern perimeter. Every weapon firing simultaneously. Grenades, grenade launchers. The noise was deafening. It sounded like the entire compound was being overrun. The Boko Haram fighters on the 3rd floor heard it and panicked. Half of them ran to the windows to see what was happening. That's when Team Alpha struck. They breached through 2 entrances simultaneously, moving with overwhelming speed. The terrorists didn't have time to turn their weapons on the hostages. They didn't have time to do anything except die. The firefight lasted 8 seconds. When it was over, all 20 terrorists were dead. Not a single hostage was hit. It was the most precise close-quarters battle any of the operators had ever been part of. All hostages secure. Begin full evacuation. The operators started moving all 200 hostages toward the evacuation route. Team Charlie had secured a path through the jungle to a clearing 3 kilometers away, where helicopters would land at first light. But Boko Haram wasn't done. Their leadership realized the hostages were escaping and ordered all remaining fighters to stop the evacuation. Approximately 50 terrorists, all that remained of the original 150, converged on the evacuation route. This was the moment the mission could still fail. The operators had 200 hostages, many wounded, all exhausted, moving through hostile jungle at night with 50 terrorists trying to intercept them. Team Charlie, positioned along the evacuation route, became the last line of defense. 10 French and Nigerian operators against 50 attackers. They had to hold long enough for the hostages to reach safety. The first contact came at 04:45 hours. Boko Haram fighters attacked from the east, trying to cut the evacuation route. The French commandos responded with devastating precision, suppressed fire from concealed positions. The terrorists couldn't see where the shots were coming from. They just saw their men falling. But they kept coming. These were the hardcore believers, the ones willing to die for their cause. They charged through the gunfire, getting closer with each wave. A Nigerian operator was hit in the leg. He kept firing from a prone position, refusing to be moved until all hostages were clear. "I've got this. Keep them moving." At 05:10 hours, the first hostages reached the extraction zone. 45 minutes until sunrise. The helicopters couldn't land until there was light to see. Too dangerous to attempt a night insertion in unknown jungle. But that meant holding the perimeter for 45 more minutes, while Boko Haram threw everything they had at them. The operators formed a defensive circle around the extraction zone. Every man found a position. Every weapon pointed outward. They had maybe 1,000 rounds of ammunition left between them, enough for 45 minutes. Maybe. At 05:20 hours, Boko Haram launched their final assault. 50 fighters attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. It was suicide, but they were desperate. If they let those hostages escape, it would be a devastating propaganda defeat. The firefight was intense. Tracers crisscrossed the jungle. RPG rounds exploded in the trees. The operators fired with careful discipline, making every shot count. But the enemy kept coming. This is what true heroism looks like. Hit like if you agree. An American Delta operator ran out of ammunition. He drew his pistol and kept firing. When that was empty, he grabbed a fallen terrorist's AK-47 and used that. "Still in the fight!" he shouted. A French commando took an AK round to his chest plate. The armor stopped the bullet, but cracked 2 ribs. He stayed in position, firing through the pain. The Nigerian operator with the leg wound finally collapsed from blood loss. 2 hostages, former nurses, took over his medical care, while he directed other operators to his position. At 05:45 hours, the sky began to lighten. Dawn was coming. And so were the helicopters. 4 heavy-lift birds capable of carrying everyone out in one lift. But Boko Haram wasn't giving up. The remaining 30 fighters launched one final desperate charge. They knew if those helicopters landed, they'd lost. The operators formed a firing line. "This is it! Make every shot count!" The charging terrorists got within 30 meters, then 20, then 10. The operators held their fire until the absolute last moment, then unleashed a wall of lead that stopped the charge cold. Bodies piled up. The few survivors broke and ran. At 05:55 hours, the helicopters landed. The hostages were loaded first, women and children, then men, then wounded operators. The whole process took 7 minutes. 7 minutes of vulnerability, while rotors spun and the aircraft sat on the ground like targets. But no more attacks came. Boko Haram was broken. They had lost over 120 fighters. Their hostages were gone. Their propaganda victory had turned into a devastating defeat. At 06:02 hours, the last helicopter lifted off. Operation Black Horizon was complete. All 200 hostages rescued, every single one alive. 30 operators went in. 29 came out. One Nigerian commando had died in the initial breach. It was a tragic loss, but the mission was a success. The helicopters flew to a secure location where medical teams waited. The hostages were treated for dehydration, malnutrition, and various injuries. Several required hospitalization, but all would eventually recover. The international media would report that hostages were freed in a military operation. No details, no specifics. The operators wanted it that way. They didn't do it for recognition. They did it because 200 innocent people needed help, and they were the ones who could provide it. 3 years later, in 2022, parts of Operation Black Horizon were declassified. The full story could finally be told. And what a story it was. Military analysts called it one of the most successful hostage rescue operations in modern history. The speed of execution, from breach to evacuation in 62 minutes. The minimal hostage casualties, 0 killed, minor injuries only. The devastating impact on Boko Haram, over 120 fighters eliminated, significant loss of morale and propaganda. But the most impressive aspect was the international cooperation. 4 nations, 4 different military cultures, working together seamlessly. British precision, American firepower, French technical expertise, Nigerian local knowledge. Each brought something essential to the mission. The British SAS commander later said, "We trained for years to be the best at what we do. But on that night, we learned that the best isn't about one nation or one unit. It's about professionals who can work together, regardless of flag or uniform." Those Delta operators, French commandos, Nigerian soldiers, they were outstanding. I would serve with them again without hesitation. An American Delta operator echoed the sentiment. "I've worked with a lot of different units in my career. That British commander was one of the finest officers I've ever seen. Cool under pressure, brilliant tactical mind, led from the front. And those French breaching teams? Absolute artists. They blew holes exactly where they needed to be. Textbook perfect." The French contingent commander added, "The Nigerian operators don't get enough credit. They knew that terrain like their backyard. They knew how Boko Haram thought, how they would react. Without their intelligence and guidance, the mission would have been far more difficult. These soldiers changed history. Share this story to honor them." The rescued hostages went through extensive debriefing and psychological counseling. Many suffered from PTSD. All had been traumatized by their ordeal. But they were alive, and they were free. That was what mattered. One of the rescued aid workers later wrote about the experience. "We had given up hope. We knew they were going to execute us at dawn. We were saying goodbye to each other, making peace with God. Then we heard explosions, saw flashes of light, and suddenly these operators were there, cutting our chains, telling us we were going home. I will never forget that moment. Never forget those brave men who risked their lives for people they didn't even know." A teacher who had been held for all 47 days said, "They were so calm, so professional. Even while bullets were flying and explosions were going off, they spoke to us with kindness and reassurance. They treated us with dignity. They carried those who couldn't walk. They shared their water. They were warriors, yes, but they were also compassionate human beings." One of the children rescued, a 12-year-old girl, drew a picture months later showing soldiers with wings. When asked why she gave them wings, she said, "Because they were angels. They saved us when we thought no one was coming." The operation had ripple effects beyond the immediate rescue. Boko Haram was severely weakened by the loss of so many fighters. Their propaganda machine was damaged. How do you claim strength when you can't protect your most valuable captives? Recruiting became harder. Funding dried up. Other hostage situations ended more quickly, as terrorists realized that holding hostages was no longer a winning strategy. Intelligence gathered from the compound led to follow-on operations. Several Boko Haram leaders were captured or killed. Supply networks were dismantled. Training camps were destroyed. The rescue mission became the starting point for a broader degradation of the terrorist organization's capabilities. But for the 30 operators who executed the mission, the greatest reward was simpler. They had done their job. They had saved innocent lives. And in a world often filled with darkness, they had been a light. The Nigerian operator who died during the breach was given a hero's funeral. His name was added to a memorial wall honoring Special Forces soldiers who died in the line of duty. The British, American, and French contingents all sent representatives. His family was told that he died saving innocent lives, which brought them some comfort. One of his teammates said at the funeral, "He knew the risks. We all did. But he also knew that 200 people would die if we didn't act. So he went in first. That's who he was. A protector, a warrior, a hero. We'll honor his memory by continuing the mission he believed in. Today, most of those 200 rescued hostages are living normal lives. They've returned to their families, resumed their careers. Some still struggle with the trauma, but they're alive to struggle. That's everything. And whenever they think about those 47 days in captivity, they also remember the moment salvation arrived. The moment warriors from 4 nations crashed through the walls, fought off terrorists, and carried them to freedom. The compound in the Sambisa forest is now abandoned. Nigerian forces destroyed it after the rescue to prevent Boko Haram from using it again. The jungle is slowly reclaiming the site. In a few years, no trace will remain of what happened there, but the memory will endure. In the minds of the operators who executed the mission, in the hearts of the hostages who were saved, in the legacy of international cooperation that proved different nations can work together for a common good. Operation Black Horizon, March 23, 2019. 30 operators, 150 terrorists, 200 hostages, and a mission that proved that courage, skill, and determination can overcome any odds. These warriors went into the darkness so that others could see the light. They risked everything so that innocent people could have a future. They asked for no recognition, no praise, no reward beyond knowing they had done what was right. That is heroism in its purest form. That is what Special Operations warriors do. And that is why we must never forget their sacrifices. The British commander, in a rare interview years later, was asked what he wanted people to know about Operation Black Horizon. He thought for a moment, then said, "I want people to know that good still exists in this world, that there are men and women willing to run toward danger when others run away, that terrorism and evil can be defeated by courage and righteousness. And most importantly, I want those 200 people we rescued to know that they were worth it. Every risk, every bullet, every sleepless night afterward, they were worth it. They mattered. And we would do it all again. One mission, one night, 200 lives saved, and a reminder that in the darkest places, heroes still rise." Subscribe to Untold War Stories, official to discover more forgotten heroes.